Welcome to another edition of Diplomatic Channel. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Depending on when you're watching this, Americans will either be headed to the polls for the presidential election or would have already voted in a new president. Either way, our conversation with Professor of Political Economy and International Relations, Professor Gabriel Babawale, is relevant. It's not just about the elections, it's about US-Nigeria relations and agenda setting for the new president. We touch on areas relating to US-Nigeria relations and how important it will be for the next US president to visit Nigeria. And the last time a US president visited Nigeria was in 2003, when then President George W. Bush visited then President Olusegun Obasanjo at the presidential villa in Abuja on July 12, 2003. Former US President Barack Obama made visits to Ghana, Kenya, Egypt, Senegal, Tanzania, and South Africa. While former President Donald Trump made no visits to the continent, he did meet with then Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari, Vice President Yemi Osinbajo, Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta, Rwandan President Paul Kagame, Ghanaian President Nana Akufo-Addo, and then Guinean President Alpha Conde at the White House, as well as Ivorian President Alassane Ouattara, then Senegalese President Macky Sall, late Namibian President Hage Geingob, former South African President Jacob Zuma, Zimbabwean President Emmerson Mnangagwa, and former Ethiopian Prime Minister Haile Mariam Desalegn and Uganda's Yoweri Museveni. President Joe Biden has made no visits to Africa. He was scheduled to visit Angola on October 13, 2024, but had to shelve that because of Hurricane Milton's advance on Florida. The visit was set to deliver a diplomatic victory for President João Lourenço's troubled government, while giving the Southern African nation regional bragging rights as Washington's chosen country after a decade's absence. While America touts Africa and Nigeria as a close partner, the relationship has not been prioritized over the years. Critics say President Biden never really seemed keen on prioritizing Africa in the first place, even as rival world powers like China and Russia aggressively expand their footprints on the continent. What do you think? Or you'd like to reserve your thoughts for after you hear what Professor Gabriel Babawale has to say. That's coming up after a quick check and other discussions in diplomatic circles.
The Nigerians in Diaspora Commission, NIDCOM, has commended the Minister of Interior, Mr. Olubunmi Tunji-Ojo, and his team for recent innovations in passport application and collection processes, which aim to improve efficiency for Nigerians abroad. The high praise is coming from the Chairman CEO of the Commission, Mrs. Abike Dabiri Erewa, following the Nigerian Immigration Service launch of the contactless passport application system on Friday, November 1st, 2024. Phase 1 of the launch will be in Canada, while Phase 2 will be rolled out in the United Kingdom, the United States and Italy on November the 15th. Nigeria and the rest of the world will access the system from December the 1st, marking the third phase. The Nigerian government has commiserated with the Spanish government over the recent devastating flash floods that killed nearly 160 people. The condolences were conveyed in a letter by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. In it, the Federal Republic of Nigeria said it was dismayed at the news, but stands with Spain at this tragic moment. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs has debunked reports of Nigerians in Libya being harassed by Libyan authorities, following the verdict of the Confederation of African Football, which indicted the Libyan Football Association for their ill treatment of the Nigerian team and officials while in Libya for a Nations Cup qualifying match. A statement from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs says this is contrary to a newspaper publication on November 3, 2024. The ministry says the well-being of Nigerian citizens anywhere in the world remains top priority for the federal government, which will continue to strive to safeguard the lives of Nigerians at all times.
Joining us now is Professor of Political Economy and International Relations at the University of Lagos, Professor Gabriel Babawale. Professor Babawale, thank you for joining us on the program today.
My pleasure, Amarachi. Nice being part of this program.
We'll soon be counting down or counting hours now to the election. And for other viewings of the program, it will be after the election, probably after the winner has been announced. Do you think American elections have become more interesting over time in the last at least decade or so, and that this would be one of the most unique elections in the country's modern history?
I think it's become very important all over the world to follow what happens in America because of the strategic position of the United States in the world. It's the world's leading power, especially militarily speaking. And in fact, the world's also very strong, if not the strongest economic power, only being rivaled by China. And it has controlling authority over most international financial institutions that were created after the Second World War, such as the Bretton Woods institutions like the IMF and World Bank. And on account of that, a number of countries want to follow what happens in American politics. So in the last decade, as you have rightly said, there has been a lot of interest, a heightened interest in what happens in the US. Of course, talking in terms of the United States itself, it's a very important election. Important because you have the Democrats and the Republicans, the two dominant political parties in the United States, even though it's a multi-party democracy, but at least you have two dominant parties like we do have in our country there. These parties are at each other's throat, so to say, because they are trying to seek for the attention of the people, for the control of the policies that would shape the future of America. Yeah, when I talk about policies, I'm talking about economic policies, trade policies, as well as domestic policies that has to do with the welfare of the people, that has to do with subsidy that they give to their people, and that also has to do with the relationship that America maintains with countries around the world, starting, of course, with the European Union and other countries across the world. So it's a very important election. What makes it also more important is that the two candidates are running neck to neck. Indeed, it is said to be a thin edge competition now, a razor thin competition between the two parties. And as we come down to the D-Day, which is November 5, it is difficult for any pundit to actually predict who's going to win the election. And this is one additional thing that makes the competition and this year's election very significant and unique in its own way.
How would you describe the campaigns of both parties? The campaign of Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris and that of the Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump?
I think it's been a mixed bag. We've had contestations and disputations about policies. As you know, the Republicans and the Democrats have diametrically opposed policies. While the Democrats are liberal, they want to talk about welfare of the people, they want to talk about some measure of controlling the level of the prices of goods and commodities, and being a little bit more liberal about border matters. The Republicans are very serious about restricting the inflow of immigrants. They are also more interested not in subsidizing or talking about the welfare of the people at large, but they talk about tax cuts, especially for the rich. And this has actually showed the distinction between the two of them. Again, we can say that the nature of the campaign has been a mixed bag, like I said earlier. Mixed bag in the sense that we've had disputations about policies, we have contestations about policies, but we also had some downside where name calling has taken the center stage. And I think, to be frank, the Republican candidate, former President Donald Trump, has been more guilty in this regard, even though we have had Kamala Harris, who has been more measured in her responses, also using the word fascist at a point. But generally speaking, I think the tone from the Republican candidate has been more harsh, more hawkish, And that, of course, has poisoned the atmosphere, leading the Democratic candidate alleging that the rhetoric of the Republican Party candidate is intended to divide the American populace, and that this is not good for the unity of the country. But I think to some extent, those of us who are not Americans have been taken aback by the vitriolic nature of the exchanges and the unrestrained accusations and abuses that have tended to be reflected in some of the campaign rallies. This, of course, has not actually subsumed the quality of the manifestos or the exchanges that the two candidates have made in terms of the differences in their policies. They still stand out, as you know. And for that, I think we can say that American politics, to a large extent, has also been dominated by campaign over issues. Today, we hear about abortion rights, which is what the Democrats are playing up, while the Republicans are very quiet about that. We've heard about the Republican candidate talking about executing the most massive deportation of immigrants in history, while the Democrats have been a little bit quiet about that. We've had the Republican candidate talking about maintaining a policy of import restriction by the imposition of tariffs and levies over imported goods, which some say may hurt the economy. But this has not been the position maintained by the Democratic Party. So in a way, we have it as an admixture of issue-based campaign laced with occasional outbursts bordering on what I call abuse and very harmful rhetoric.
I want to go back to some of the things that you have highlighted, which is the rhetorics from both sides, especially from the Trump camp. The name calling, you rightly mentioned, he said all sorts of things. Anyone he considers, and I think that the Democratic presidential candidate, Kamala Harris, rightly put it when she said that anyone that Trump perceives as an enemy, he vilifies. He goes out and he insults the person, and then he talks about people who are not on his side and all that. And then, even though they're campaigning over issues, America has to survive this even after the elections. By the time any one of them becomes president, whoever it is, the rhetoric lives on and the feelings do not go away. We saw that when Trump became president in 2015. The rhetoric that existed even before the elections, there was a lot of violence after the elections. And then when he lost in 2020, he couldn't take a defeat. And then we saw the riots happening on January 6th. So, how do you think America can recover from the impact and the effects of these rhetorics that are going on from both sides, but more from the Trump camp?
It's going to be very difficult because the atmosphere has been charged as of now. The incendiary rhetoric continues, and that, of course, has charged the atmosphere of politics in America. This has been further heightened by the usual Trump tactics of alleging that the vote is being rigged, preparatory to a very serious protest if he wins. It's ironic that a candidate is saying that he can only lose the election if the election is rigged. So you are preparing for what I can call a self-fulfilling prophecy, such that if you don't win, it then means that it has been rigged. I don't think there's anywhere in the world where anybody is allowed to make that kind of assertion and get away with it. Again, like you rightly said, this rhetoric is actually dividing the United States. And as you would observe, this is why a candidate like Kamala Harris has been talking about bringing America together and then putting the past behind them. We are living witnesses to what happened in 2016 after Trump won, like you rightly pointed out. And of course, the aftermath of his loss in 2020, which almost led to a situation of the breakdown of law and order in America when some individuals attacked the Capitol. And that was the first time in history that you have violence taking hold of America immediately after the election. I think right now, Americans are watchful of what is happening. They are trying to prevent the recurrence of the incident of 2020 because they know that it not only does a very irreparable damage to the image of America as the leading democratic country in the world, it also creates friction and factions within the country itself, which may make the situation of the country unhealthy and can even lead to civil war. Don't forget, America had experienced a civil war before, and so it knows what it means. It knows what it means for a country to go through a civil war, and it is easy to go through a civil war when your country is divided, when the rhetoric, as we have now, is incendiary, when people are pitted against the other. Instead of seeing yourselves as opponents, you begin to see yourself as enemies. I think we must tone down that rhetoric. Americans must be insistent on the candidates saying the right things and doing the right thing. Of course, that is late now. We have 48 hours to the election. It is their choice to know who to elect at the end of the day. But I have confidence in one fact, that the institutions that control the democratic process in America are most likely going to be solid, are most likely to demonstrate integrity and ensure that nobody rubbishes their system. We saw that play out in 2020 when, in spite of all the perturbations and the turbulence that we witnessed in the political scene immediately after that election that Trump lost and Biden won, we thought that the Armageddon has come. But fortunately, because of the strength of the American institutions, that's electoral institutions, the institutions of justice, we were able to put everything under control. I think similar things will happen.
What about the issue of immigration? I know that the U.S. has had problems with irregular migration, and it's trying to check some of the problems. We see them: the change in visa policy, sometimes increase in visa fees, and so on. We know that's reflective of the current state of our economy. But do you think that America should also revisit its immigration policy towards Nigeria?
I think so, because, as I said, this is Africa's largest country, perhaps Africa's leading nation, not just in terms of population, but in terms of the strength of its economy. The largest market you can think of in Africa is here in Nigeria. So it's also in American interest to get closer to us and be more liberal in its grant of visas. I think some of the policies are restrictive and they are deliberate, and there's a need to open that up because it's been unfortunate that people get turned down for flimsy excuses. There is a regular increase in visa fees. All of these, to me, could be made better. And we could have a friendlier atmosphere of relations between the United States and Nigeria when we have this mutual understanding that our people can go. I am not saying totally that irregular migration should not be curtailed. But what I'm saying is, in cases where we know these are regular people, we must not allow prejudices to prevent those people from moving. Migration is a natural human phenomenon. People have always moved all through history, and they will continue to move. And I know that America may have cases of one or two cases that has made them to think that there's a need for more restriction. But I think there is a need for what the Russians would call a glasnost, some more openness on their past, some encouragement of our people, especially those who have genuine business. I know that there are people who want to go to school, and yet on flimsy grounds, they are denied visas. Such things cannot be justified. They are not tenable. They are going to pay money, their own money, in those schools in America and those colleges. And so there is a need for us to have a more relaxed, a more flexible environment for people to exchange visits between the US and us. I don't think we have had accusations of Nigerians preventing Americans from coming to the country. And I think we have been more liberal. So I believe that this liberalism should be mutual. And there is a need for, we usually have, we used to, and I think we still have, the Nigeria-America Binational Commission. And I think these are issues that should be taken up at the level of the Binational Commission. We've always enjoyed very good relationship. And I don't see why we should take any step that would affect that kind of very close relationship that we have mutually enjoyed.
So it's been a while we've seen a US president visit Nigeria. I mean, Barack Obama, in his 8 years in office, never visited. He did go to Kenya. He went to other African countries. President Joe Biden, same thing. President Trump never made a visit, I think, to Africa. Do you think that this should happen under this coming administration in order to, strengthen this goodwill that both countries have with each other?
It's unfortunate that in the last decade or so, we've had American president visiting Africa and excluding Nigeria. I cannot personally find a justification for that. I think it's part of the misinformation about Nigeria, the propaganda. But what we know is that Nigerians in anywhere in America today are doing great things. Talk in terms of medicine, in terms of space science in their universities. The statistics even show that that is the class of immigrants where you have the highest percentage of educated college educated graduates in America today. And that is to say that apart from being Africa's largest and most populous with the largest market on the continent, America must know that we share a lot in common. We are a diverse country like America is, multiracial, multi-ethnic, multinational.
Legitimizing government, I think, is one of the reasons the American president visits countries. And I think that, when I remember that when Barack Obama, the former US president, came to Ghana, they had just elected a new president at the time. I think it was a month or so into his presidency. I mean, the new president in Ghana, no, it wasn't Akufo-Addo. It was Atta Mills, I believe, who was president then. And then other US presidents, Barack Obama, well, Trump never visited Africa, but then President Joe Biden was supposed to be in Angola a few weeks ago before the floods happened, the storms happened in the US. Do you think the Nigerian government is legitimate enough for a US president to visit? Do you think that our democracy has lived up to international repute, to engage a US president and for a US president's visit to appear to legitimize that government?
I don't think we need the United States to confer legitimacy on our country or our government. The legitimacy of a government belongs to the people. It's the people that legitimize governments. And I think that given the fact that since the Fourth Republic, we have had several transitions which have been seamless. And that in itself shows that we have a democracy that is improving, that is being strengthened year in, year out. So it shouldn't be an excuse to say that there was nothing illegitimate about our government in 2008 or so when Barack Obama excluded Nigeria from the countries he wanted to visit. And there is nothing illegitimate about the election that we had in 2003 and the government that we have in power now. So I think what is important is for America to wake up from its slumber of not according Nigeria the proper place that it should belong in the calculation of the US foreign policy advisors. I think that we have a lot to offer the United States. It could also be a way, is that partnership that will allow and make it possible for us to have stability in the West African region and by extension Africa, which will also be in the interest of the United States. Instability in Nigeria will not be in the interest of the United States and not to talk of Africa. So whatever the US president, the incoming US president needs to do to give support to the Nigerian government must be done. largely because of a lot of things we share together, largely because they also have a lot to benefit from us economically and strategically too. Now that a lot of African states are slipping off the fingers of the United States, as it's been experienced in Mali, in Burkina Faso, in Guinea, in Niger Republic, I think it is in the interest of America to get closer to Nigeria. And so this idea of legitimacy does not come in because the present administration we have in Nigeria is as legitimate as they come. And we went through a proper democratic election, which has been adjudged by people to have produced a government which is in power. And that government must be fully accorded its own recognition as a legitimate government. So I believe that the United States must move closer. The incoming president must deepen the relationship between Nigeria and the United States in the area of trade, in the area of policy, in the area of foreign policy, in the area of economic policy, and all others. This is the only way by which its legs in Africa can be further strengthened and solidified. This is my view.
Professor Gabriel Babawale, it's been a real pleasure speaking with you. Thank you for joining us on Diplomatic Channel.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Here's our stop on the program. Let me know your thoughts on Professor Babawale's comments on the issues. You can share them using any of our social media handles or leave them in the comment section under this video on YouTube. I'm Amarachi Ubani. I'll see you next time.